The hardest thing I ever did was sit across from my father at Thanksgiving dinner and say nothing. Not because I had nothing to say, because I had too much, and none of it would have landed the way it needed to. Not yet. He had just told my aunt, loud enough for the whole table to hear, that he wasn't sure I was ever going to figure my life out, that my brother had always been the one with real drive, that sometimes you just had to accept that not all your kids were going to turn out the same way. He laughed a little when he said it. That small, dismissive laugh I had grown up flinching at. My brother was sitting right there, nodding along, cutting his turkey like the comment had been a compliment directed at him. My mother refilled her wine glass and looked out the window. My aunt made a sympathetic sound and said, "Well, she's still young." I was 31. I kept eating. I had gotten very good at that, the mechanical act of continuing while everything inside me went still and cold. I had been practicing it my whole life. What none of them knew, what I had told exactly one person on this earth, was that the house we were sitting in, my parents' house, the house my father had just used as the backdrop for his annual performance of disappointment, had not been paid for by my father. Not for the past 3 years. Not a single mortgage payment. Every month, $1,847 transferred automatically out of my business account into a shell account I had set up specifically so the origin would be invisible. Every month, the bank processed it without question. Every month, my parents went on believing they were managing fine. They were not managing fine. 3 years ago, I had found the foreclosure notice. I found it the way you find things you were never supposed to see. By accident, on a Tuesday afternoon, when I had stopped by to drop off my mother's birthday gift and no one was home. The envelope was sitting on the kitchen counter, half opened, tucked under a stack of grocery store circulars, like it could be buried under paper and stop being real. I pulled it out. I read it twice. The bank had sent it 6 weeks earlier. They were 4 months behind. I put it back exactly where I found it. I left the birthday gift on the counter. I sat in my car in their driveway for a long time. My parents had never once asked me for help. That was the thing. They had never asked, and they never would, because asking me for help would have required them to believe I was capable of giving it. And they did not believe that. My father had built his entire identity as a parent around the story that my brother was the capable one, the ambitious one, the one who was going to take care of things. I was the one who was still figuring it out. I was the one who was still figuring it out. I was the question mark. My brother was the answer. The fact that my brother had borrowed $14,000 from my parents over the previous 4 years and paid back exactly none of it was not part of the story my father told himself. Neither was the fact that my brother had been between jobs for most of that same period, surviving on optimism and parental loans, and the unshakable confidence of someone who has never been told he is not exceptional. I had built a home, staging and interior consulting business from nothing. I had started at 26 with a secondhand camera, a free website builder, and the money I had saved working doubles at a hotel front desk while taking online courses at night. I had not told my family how well it was doing because every time I tried, the conversation somehow circled back to my brother and his potential. I had stopped trying around year 2. By year 3, when I found the foreclosure notice, I was clearing just over $280,000 a year. I set up the payments the following week. I told my best friend Joanna, who had been watching my family dynamics for a decade, and responded with, "Of course you did," in a tone that was equal parts admiration and exhaustion. I told no one else. For 3 years, it worked. I went to holidays. I endured the comparisons. I ate the turkey. I said nothing. Then came that Thanksgiving, and my father's laugh and my aunt's sympathetic sound. And then my phone buzzed. I felt it in my coat pocket, still hanging on the back of my chair. I ignored it. It buzzed again. I excused myself quietly, the way I always did everything, quietly, so as not to disrupt the performance, and walked to the hallway. It was a text from a number I recognized, my mortgage servicer's automated notification system. Normally, these came in silence. I had set them up to be silent. But I had recently switched phones and apparently had not carried over all my settings, because the text was there in full visible on my lock screen. Payment of $1,847 processed for account ending in 4471. Thank you. I stared at it for a second. Then I put my phone back in my pocket and returned to the table. The problem was that my brother had also excused himself during that same 2-minute window. and he'd been standing in the hallway. I did not know that until 3 days later, when my mother called me. She didn't lead with it. She called to thank me for the cranberry sauce, which I had brought from scratch this year because she mentioned she liked homemade. We talked for a few minutes about nothing, and then she said, very carefully, "Your brother saw something on your phone. He told your father." I went very still. He said he saw a mortgage notification. He said it looked like it might be for this house. She paused. "Is that something you want to talk about?" What I noticed in that moment was how she phrased it. Not, "Is this true?" Not, "How could you keep this from us?" "Is that something you want to talk about?" Like she was already protecting me or protecting herself from the answer. "I'll come over Saturday," I said. I spent the days between the call and Saturday doing something that surprised me. I did not spiral. I had expected to. I'd spent 3 years dreading this exact scenario, and now that it was here, I felt oddly calm. Joanna came over Thursday night, and we sat at my kitchen table with takeout containers between us, and she watched me organize the documents I had been keeping in a folder in my filing cabinet for exactly this reason. "You've been ready for this for a while," she said. "I've been ready for this since before I started paying," I said. She nodded slowly. "What do you want out of it?" That was the question I had been turning over for 3 years. Not what did I want to prove, not what did I want them to feel, what did I actually want them to feel? What did I actually want? I thought about it honestly for a moment and then said, I want them to know who I actually am, not the version they decided I was when I was 15. "And your brother?" I looked down at the folder. "My brother is going to do what my brother always does. I'll handle it when it happens." Saturday arrived gray and cold. The kind of early December morning in Cincinnati that felt like the city was bracing itself. I drove to my parents' house with the folder on the passenger seat. I had not brought my best presentation materials, no printed charts or business cards, just the bank statements, the transfer records, the original foreclosure notice which I had quietly photographed and saved. My father opened the door. He was wearing his Saturday flannel shirt and holding a coffee mug, and for a moment he looked like any father on any Saturday morning. Then he looked at the folder under my arm and something in his face shifted. "Come in," he said. Just that. My mother was in the living room. My brother was there too, sitting in the chair by the window with his arms crossed and an expression I knew well, the expression he wore when he had done something he was framing as a favor. I sat on the couch. I placed the folder on the coffee table. I did not open it yet. My father sat across from me. He set down his coffee. "Your brother says he saw a bank notification on your phone." "He did." "He says it looked like it was connected to our mortgage." It was. The room went very quiet. My mother pressed her hands together in her lap. My mother pressed her hands together in her lap. My brother uncrossed and recrossed his arms. "That doesn't make any sense," my father said. His voice was controlled, but I could hear the thing underneath it. The disorientation of someone whose map of the world has just been handed back to him with an unfamiliar road marked on it. "You don't have anything to do with our mortgage." "I've been making your mortgage payments for 3 years," I said. "Every month. The servicer is Gateway Home Loans. Your account ends in 4471. You were 4 months behind when I found a foreclosure notice on your counter in December 3 years ago. You were 48 days from the bank initiating proceedings. The silence this time was different. Denser. How did you—" My mother stopped. "Started again. How were you even able to do that?" "I set up automatic transfers from my business account through an intermediary. The payments show up as coming from a property management LLC I created. It's clean. It's been audited. It's completely legal." "Your business?" my father said, and I heard the skepticism even now. Even in this moment, the residue of years of the story he had told. "Your staging business." "My staging and consulting firm. We did $280,000 last year. We have 11 active clients. We've been profitable since year 2. The room did not know what to do with that. My brother was the first to speak. He leaned forward and said, "Okay, but why wouldn't you just tell us? Why the whole secret setup?" "That's weird. Normal people don't do that. If you had money and you wanted to help, you could have just said something." I looked at him. I had prepared for this too. "I tried to tell you things," I said. "I tried to show you things. You remember the Regional Design Award I won 2 years ago?" I mentioned it at Easter. Dad said that's nice, and then asked you about your sales pitch. You remember when I got my first contract with the Northbrook development? I brought it up at Mom's birthday dinner. You said, is that the thing where you move furniture around? So yes, I stopped telling you things. Because every time I said something real, it disappeared. My brother opened his mouth. I kept going. I didn't set it up secretly to be dramatic. I set it up secretly because if you had known it was me, you would not have accepted it. You would have made it into something it wasn't. You would have questioned it. And while you were questioning it, you would have lost the house. I looked at my father. I couldn't let that happen. My father's jaw was tight. He was looking at the folder on the table. Show me, he said finally. I opened the folder. I had organized it simply. The foreclosure notice first, then the transfer records month by month, then the current balance statement showing that the loan was now 37 months ahead of schedule. I laid them out one at a time. My father picked up the foreclosure notice. He read it slowly. I watched his face do something I had never seen it do before. It didn't harden or close off. It just sort of fell. We were going to lose the house, my mother said. Not a question. A realization arriving 3 years late. Yes, and she stopped. You just started paying it. The next month, yes. My brother was looking at the transfer records. He had gone quiet in a way that wasn't his usual quiet. His usual quiet was tactical, waiting to jump in. This was something else. Where does the LLC name come from? He asked, and his voice was flatter than I expected. Pine Ridge Property Management. I've never heard of it. You wouldn't have. I created it specifically for this. So you set up a fake company to pay Mom and Dad's mortgage without telling them. He looked up at me. You don't see why that looks suspicious? It looks suspicious to you because you assumed I couldn't afford to do it honestly. Everything I did to protect your pride as much as theirs. You're welcome. He stood up. He walked to the window. He stood there with his back to us for a moment. And I watched my mother watch him, and I watched my father look at the documents in his hands. I don't understand, my father said quietly. Not to anyone in particular. Why didn't you say anything? 3 years. You sat in this house and you said nothing. Because this, I gestured at the room. The three of them, the whole weighted architecture of our family dynamics. This is exactly what would have happened. You would have questioned it. He would have made it about himself. And none of you would have said thank you. It landed harder than I expected. My mother flinched. My father's expression did something complicated. My brother turned from the window. I would have said thank you. You're saying it now in the form of asking whether it was a fake company. He didn't have an answer for that. I gathered the documents back into the folder. I stood up. The payments are going to keep coming. I'm not stopping them because of this. But I needed you to know who has been making them. And I needed you to know that I am not who you have spent 15 years deciding I am. I walked to the door. My father said my name. I stopped. Turned. He was still holding the foreclosure notice. He looked smaller somehow, sitting in his chair with that piece of paper in his hand. Not physically smaller, just reduced. The way people look when a story they built their life around turns out to have a different ending than they thought. I didn't know you could do something like this, he said. I know you didn't, I said. That's why I'm here. I drove home and sat in my parking garage for a while, engine off, listening to the tick of the cooling metal. Joanna had offered to be on standby and I texted her. It happened. Talk later. She sent back a single word. Proud. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired in a very specific way. The tiredness of having carried something heavy for a long time and finally setting it down, not in a good place, just somewhere. The work of figuring out what came next was still ahead. It came from my brother first, 3 days later. A voice message, which surprised me. He never left voice messages. He said he had been thinking. He said he had looked up my company online, the real one, not the LLC, and that he had read some of the press coverage, a piece in a Cincinnati design magazine from the previous spring. He said he didn't remember me mentioning it. He said he wasn't sure if that meant he hadn't been listening or if I had stopped mentioning things and he thought probably both were true. He didn't exactly apologize. He said he thought he had made some assumptions and that he was starting to think some of them were wrong. For my brother, that was the closest thing to an apology I had ever received, and I recognized it for what it was. I called him back. We talked for 40 minutes, which was longer than we had talked in years. He told me things were not going well with the business he had been trying to start. The third attempt, which I had known about only in outline. He said it wasn't working out the way he'd hoped. I asked him what the actual problem was, the specific thing that wasn't working, and he told me, and I listened, and at the end I said, "That's a sourcing problem, not a product problem. You're building the right thing from the wrong end." He was quiet for a moment and then said, "How do you know that?" "Because I made the same mistake in year one," I said. "And someone told me to flip it around and start from the client need instead of the supply chain." We didn't become different people in that conversation. We didn't undo years of distance in 40 minutes. But something shifted. Some small tectonic thing that felt quiet enough to be real. My parents were harder. The week after my visit, my mother called every day, small calls, checking in. It was not her usual pattern, and I think we both knew what it was. An attempt at repair through small, repeated contact. I accepted the calls. I kept them short but warm. I did not pretend everything was fine. I did not punish her for how things had been. I just showed up, call by call, and let the pattern rebuild itself slowly. My father took longer. He was not a man who moved quickly toward the things that required him to be wrong. I knew that. I had learned to work around it for most of my life. To stop expecting him to meet me and just accept the distance as a feature of the terrain. But something had changed in that living room when he held the foreclosure notice, and I think we both felt it. He called me 6 weeks later, a Sunday afternoon. He asked if I wanted to get lunch. We met at a diner near his work, the kind of place with laminated menus and coffee that arrives in a thick ceramic mug without you asking. We sat in a booth by the window. We ordered. We talked about small things for a while, and then he put down his fork and said, "I think I made some mistakes in how I handled things. Over the years, with you." I waited. "I think I was so focused on your brother, making sure he had what he needed, making sure he didn't fail, that I kind of stopped paying attention to what was happening with you. And I told myself it was because you were fine, because you were handling things." He looked out the window. "But I think the truth is that you were handling things because I made it so you had to. And I called that you being fine because it was easier than calling it what it actually was." The diner noise went on around us. Someone's kids were laughing in the booth behind me. "I needed you to need me differently than he did," I said. "I needed you to notice what I was doing, not just that I was doing it quietly. There's a difference between a kid who doesn't need much and a kid who stopped asking because she learned there was no point." He nodded. He didn't defend himself. That was the part that surprised me most. "I want to learn what you actually do," he said. "Your work. I want to actually understand it, not just hear the name of it." That was how it started. Not with a dramatic pronouncement. With a request to understand. I told him about the first client I ever landed. A real estate agent named Barbara who had taken a chance on me when I had no portfolio. Just a pitch deck I had built on my laptop at 1 a.m. after my front desk shift. He listened the way I had always wanted him to listen. Not waiting to redirect, just actually in it with me. He asked questions that made sense. He remembered things from earlier in the conversation and connected them to things that came later. By the time we left the diner, we had been there for almost 2 hours. He paid the check without making it into anything. Outside in the parking lot, he hugged me, and it was not the one-armed obligatory hug of a man performing family. It was a real one, a little clumsy, held for a second too long. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have said that a long time ago." "You saying it now," I said. The mortgage payments continued. I thought about stopping them after everything came out, taking back the financial autonomy, drawing a clean line. But I didn't stop them. Not because I felt obligated and not out of guilt. I stopped them for 1 week in February just to see how it felt. And what I found was that continuing them was actually a choice I was making, not a habit I was trapped in. That distinction mattered to me. Joanna asked me about it over coffee in March. "You know you could use that money for the expansion." "I know. You're choosing not to." "I'm choosing to keep paying because it's what I decided to do. Not because I owe them. Not because I'm afraid of what happens if I stop. Because I looked at the situation and decided this was what I wanted." I held my mug in both hands. That's different. Very different, she said. Spring came. I took on 2 new clients. My brother pivoted his business model based on the conversation we'd had, and 3 months later sent me a message with a screenshot of his first profitable month. Just a screenshot, no words, which was the most genuine thing he had sent me in years. I sent back a thumbs up, and then, after a second, a real reply. That's the right direction. Keep going. My parents came to see the staging reveal on a downtown condo project in April. My father had asked if that was something they could do. Come see what the actual work looked like in the real world. I told him yes. They stood in the empty living room of a 1,200 square foot unit I had transformed over 6 days, and my mother turned in a slow circle and said, "You did this." And I said, "We did, yes." And she said, "I didn't know it looked like this." My father walked through every room. He didn't say anything for a while. When he came back to the living room, he had his hands in his pockets and he was looking at the way I had placed the light in the corner to open up the sightline, a small thing that takes years to learn to see. "This is what you've been doing," he said. "All this time." "All this time," I said. He shook his head, not in disbelief, but in something closer to recognition. The kind of recognition that carries a weight of its own because it arrives late. We are not a fixed family now. We are a family in the early stages of being rebuilt, which is slower and less satisfying than a clean resolution, but more honest. My brother still has a long way to go toward being someone I fully trust. My mother still defaults to deflection before she catches herself. My father still has moments where the old habits surface, where he talks about my brother's potential in the same breath as my accomplishments, weighting them unevenly without seeming to notice. But he notices now, and when he does, he corrects it. That is not a small thing. That is the whole thing. The morning I paid off the first year's worth of accelerated principal, bringing their payoff date from 11 years out to 8, I sat at my kitchen table with my coffee and my laptop, and I thought about the woman who had found that foreclosure notice on a Tuesday afternoon and decided, without fanfare, to quietly become the foundation her family didn't know they were standing on. She did not do it to be recognized. She did it because she could, and because she decided that was enough of a reason. I still think it was. I think about the foreclosure notice a lot, not the confrontation, not the diner with my father, not even the moment my brother sent me that screenshot of his first profitable month. I think about the Tuesday afternoon when I pulled that envelope out from under the grocery store circulars and read it twice and put it back exactly where I found it. Nobody saw that moment. Nobody saw that moment. There was no audience for the decision I made in the next 60 seconds, and I think that's the part that actually matters. The way things played out. My father eventually sitting across from me in that booth, my brother leaving a voice message he clearly rehearsed, my mother turning in a slow circle in that staged condo saying, "You did this?" None of that was luck. It was the direct result of choices made over years, most of them invisible, most of them made in rooms where no one was watching. That's how it actually works. The outcomes that look dramatic from the outside are almost always the slow accumulation of quiet decisions that nobody saw coming because nobody was paying attention. I didn't set up those payments to punish anyone or to prove a point. I set them up because I looked at a problem and I had the ability to solve it, and I decided that was a good enough reason. That's something I had to build in myself over a long time. The ability to act on what I knew was right without needing anyone to validate the decision first. When you grow up being told your judgment doesn't count, you learn to outsource it. You wait for permission. You shrink your instincts down until they fit inside the space someone else assigned you. Unlearning that is some of the hardest work there is. It doesn't happen in a single conversation. It happens the way Joanna described it, call by call, choice by choice, until the new pattern is stronger than the old one. The intelligence piece, knowing how to do it, how to structure the LLC, how to make the payments untraceable, how to build a business from a secondhand camera and a free website, that was something I had worked for. I taught myself those things in hotel lobbies and at kitchen tables at midnight because no one was going to hand them to me. But the knowledge alone doesn't move anything. You have to be willing to use what you know, even when the people around you have decided in advance that you don't know much. And then there's the part my father finally named in that diner. Even if he didn't use these words, the persistence, the 3 years of showing up at holidays and eating the turkey and absorbing the comparisons and still transferring the money the first of every month without fail, not because I was performing patience, Because I had decided this was what I was doing, and I didn't need anyone's acknowledgement to keep doing it. My father said, "Your silent success was the loudest thing in the room." He didn't say it exactly like that. That's the video version. What he actually said, over eggs and bad coffee in a laminate booth, was, "I told myself you were fine because it was easier than seeing what you were actually doing." That landed differently. Quieter. More true. I still think about that woman in the driveway reading the notice twice, putting it back. She didn't know how it would end. She just knew what the right thing was, and she had enough integrity, enough sense, enough stubbornness to do it anyway. That's the whole story, really. Everything else is just what happened after.